Yeah, I'm Chris Scheid with Integrated Transportation Management. We're working on a product called My Carrier. Essentially what the product does is it seamlessly integrates LTL shippers with their freight carriers without the need for a middleman. So they can interact with multiple carriers through a single platform without the need for an intermediary. Yeah, so we decided to outsource for a couple of reasons. First, to be able to build the team internally, we saw the time ramp up would be too long to develop that team, and we were speed to market was going to be crucial for us. We did 3 rounds of sourcing for development. One of them was within the United States. One thing we found is a lot of the United States firms use outsourced development to do a lot of their actual development, but charge very high managerial cost, and then you have a middleman in between. Since I had experience working with outsourced development firms prior, it felt like a better solution to go directly to a firm that had the expertise such that we could communicate directly. Yeah, so we did 3 rounds. Each round had 3 to 4 firms we were considering, and we were pretty much across the globe. We looked at different firms within the United States, Philippines, India, and then Europe and Eastern Europe. So upon research, we found that Ukraine had a real established expertise in development where they've had the education system and in time for an entire generation of people to come up that would be skilled in the field. When we kind of started narrowing in on Ukraine for one of our rounds, we actually did a whole round that was based off Ukraine firms. We found it through a site which I'm not remembering at the time, but that had the various firms and what their expertise were listed in. So we used that as a list to start off of, and then we did our own interview process from there. So we were looking for a team that we could work closely and collaborate with, and that is flexible and agile to moving requirements. We were really looking for proof of concept, trying to see a project that had been brought through to fruition of something they've done prior. One thing we saw in the work of IT Craft is one, they've done some very complex projects, but also their design capabilities were, we felt, industry leading in that field. Hesitations are pretty similar to any of the outsourced solutions, just with the uncertainty, with the travel time to be able to visit in person, but nothing specific to IT Craft, just the general things that come along with outsourced development. Yeah, so the time difference for a normal daily call hasn't been too bad for us. We do a call at 8 a.m. our time, which is the end of business for the developers. Once or twice due to timeline constraints, we have done 2 calls in a day. That's a little burdensome just because of the time difference for us, but being a startup company and being how rare those calls have needed to happen, the burden hasn't been significant. And also, we were experienced prior working with India, who had 11.5 hour time difference. So the 9 was actually a bit more favorable for us. No, I think the communication has been pretty strong. Their English capabilities are, I would say, very high. The only thing is we have to be careful not to use idioms that are popular to the US, but that was something to overcome quickly and as with any person you're communicating with, especially even geographically throughout the US. So we found the language barrier to be very minimal. Once in a while, because of internet connections, there might be 1 or 2 things lost in translation, but they're really easy to understand upon a second repeat if that ever becomes necessary. So one thing we do is a daily call in which we're planning for the future development, but also talking about what's been accomplished. The one we found most successful though is we have set up Jira successfully to where we can track and monitor how a sprint's going, such that the burn down rate and how many story points we've estimated into a sprint. So we've found that if anything, we've been able to really increase velocity over time. And so they're always working to try to push the envelope of what they can get done. We actually just completed a sprint about an hour ago and had the most story points we've had to date. So we've really been impressed from that standpoint. Yeah, we've worked really collaboratively together. There's been a couple areas where I have relied on them for best practices in user management, things outside of my expertise field in logistics. So they've been very collaborative from that standpoint. Yeah, so we've obviously had at times some small project creep where we've added a few requirements, but the team's done very good from estimating and always working to redefine what our timeline looks like and what that impact will be. So one thing we found that's very important is we communicate the requirements and make sure to put estimates in place and then look at the holistic picture of what that's going to do to the overall timeline. We have found the team has been able to be very accommodating when we do increase that scope to see what they can do to either make other parts more efficient or trim down to stay on time as much as possible. And one other thing is when it was required, we did see a point because of increased scope that we were going to miss our deadline, but we were able to work closely with IT Craft to add another developer to be able to get back on track and accomplish that additional scope of work. I think the impression is very similar. We had very high expectations. We spent a lot of time sourcing the development firm, and I feel like T-Craft's really lived up to them. It's been continual improvement as we go along, as far as the product we've been producing, the functionality, and the design work has been really leading of what we see out there from consumer-based websites. They've really done a good job. Yeah, I'd highly recommend IT Craft. They've been great to work with, they have strong capabilities, and they've really met all of our expectations. We've actually talked with a few people we work with locally that we recommend them to, but other people that are looking at this video that would be curious, I would highly recommend them as well.